So in the previous video, we learned how to write a very simple bit of Swift code which printed our name in the logs when the app was run. That wasn't that exciting in itself, but this time we're going to make it so that we can actually interact with our app here. So first off, we're going to recreate our user interface. So let's get rid of these items. I can either select them there, or I can use Shift click to select them there and delete them that way. So here's a very quick challenge for you. Can you add a button to our screen which says click me? Go for it. You manage it? Should be fine. I've already got button there. You can always search for it down there if you can't find it. And then we're just going to drag it in and change the text. That makes it a little bit too big for our box. So just make the box a little bigger. There we go. All right, so now we have a button called Click Me, but of course that button doesn't actually do anything yet other than appear to be pressed like that. Okay, so our first step is going to be to put something into the logs when that button is clicked. So that's stage one. And then stage two will be actually display something on the app itself when the button is clicked. Stage three, in fact, which we'll cover in this video as well, will be to have a text field and get the value of that and display that on the screen as well. So then we've got some really deep interaction going on. Okay, so here we go. We need to connect this button to our code. So remember, our code is over here in viewcontroller.swift and our storyboard is here with our button in it. To link that up, we click the double circles and I'll go for the assistant editor on the right. And here, remember, we can click this button to get rid of the scene guide as we don't have a lot of room. Give ourselves as much room as we need. In fact, for this particular part, we can get rid of the left and right toolbars as well. So we've just got our storyboard and our code. Right, now here's the fun bit. We're going to control click on the Click Me button and drag from the Click Me button and just under Class View Controller. If you do it outside Class View Controller, it won't work, either above it or below it. And we don't want to add it anywhere inside these methods. So just underneath where it says Class View Controller, and then let go. And this will essentially allow us to create a connection between this button in our interface and our code. So we can tell the app to do something when that button is clicked. Now, there are essentially two types of connection, an outlet or an action. Now we want to do something when the button is clicked. So we're going to create an action here. As you can see, there is actually a third type outlet collection there, but we'll leave that for now. These are the main two that we'll be working with. So enter the name for the action. Now this can be anything you like really, but it should be something that describes what's happened. So I'm going to have button click there, and then we'll leave the type as any. Could be a UI button, that's what the thing is. So we could select UI button, but I'll leave that as any. And then we've got a number of possible events. So you can see we can respond to a touchdown, a cancelled touch, dragged enter to the button, etc., etc. But the most common is touch up inside, which essentially means that the user has lifted their finger off of the screen inside the button, which is our way of detecting a button press. And then we've got various arguments we can send. They are something, again, we'll use later, but really we only need the sender for now. So click connect. And what we've created here is a special method called button clicked. And you can see it's a method because we use the keyword func to create it. And this has a special type of IB action. The IB stands for Interface Builder. And this is an action because it refers to when the button is clicked. So, another quick challenge for you. Can you write some code there that will display a message in the logs? The message can be anything you like, but I'd recommend something like button clicked. Go for it. All right, hope you managed that. All we needed was exactly the same code that we had before. So print, and then our speech marks, and then whatever you want inside these speech marks. All right, so just a quick recap. What we've done there is we've created a connection between the button and our code, and then we created an action or an IB action called button clicked, which is some code that will be run every time the button is clicked, and that code will print button clicked in the logs. All right, fingers crossed. Let's see this in action. Okay, so there's our button. I'm going to tap it, and you can see there, button clicked. Fantastic. So that's our first little bit of interaction, but it still isn't genuinely interactive in the sense that the user cannot see the response. Only we can as the developer. So we're going to create a label, and we're going to change the content of that label to something when the button is clicked, and then the user will actually be able to see the response. So let's create a label. I'm sure you remember how to do this, so I won't set it as a challenge. We'll just bring in a label on the object library, and we'll drag it in there. And we're going to do something very similar to what we did with the button. Let's just clear things out a little bit. I'm going to control drag again to the point just underneath where it says class view controller. And this time I'm going to create an outlet connection. So this is going to be a connection which allows us to refer to that particular label and change its content. So this is not an action because we're not interacting with the label. The user's not clicking on the label, but we want to be able to refer to the label and change its text. So I'm just going to call this label, very simple. And again, we'll leave the other options as the default and then click connect. And that gives us this slightly strange bunch of code. We've created an interface builder outlet. I'm going to ignore the keyword weak for the moment. Again, feel free to Google to get a bit more information if you want, but I think that'll be confusing right now. In your journey, we will look at it in a lot more detail later on. This var indicates that we're creating a variable, and that variable is label. It's called label, that's its name, and it has a type UI label. So remember, again, the colon we use to declare a type, and so the type of this variable is a user interface label. So this is all talking about this particular label here. The exclamation mark there is something that we'll see a lot of later on and can be quite confusing for new Swift coders. Essentially what it means is that the label has to exist. And if we try and run this code without the label existing, if for example I deleted the label and ran the code as it is, then the app would crash. So the exclamation mark is saying that the label has to exist at this point, otherwise the app will crash. But again, we'll look at the exclamation marks and exactly what they're doing later on in the next section. All right, so now we want to write some code when the button is clicked to update the content of the label. And that's actually pretty easy to do. We start by typing the name of the label, which you remember is just label. And then we want to change the text of the label. So to do that, we use label.text. Simple as that. And we want to set that to something in particular. So label.text, and I'll set it to you clicked the button. Simple as that. So now when the button is clicked, not only will button clicked appear in the logs, but the label text will be changed to "you click the button." So let's have a look. So let's click the button. Aha! Now you can see it has been changed, but because the label box is pretty small, it's not big enough for all that text. So let's just change that. We'll stretch the label all the way out. And what I'll also do is get rid of the initial text. So the label is there, but it's invisible because it doesn't have any text. And I'll also center it, because I like things to be centered. Okay, let's try it again. So now we should find that the only thing that the user can see initially is the Click Me button. And when they click it, the label appears, telling them that they've clicked the button. Great stuff. So we've got 2 out of 3 now. We can do something when the button is clicked. That's stage number 1. That was our button clicked message there. Stage 2 is being able to display a message to the user when the button's clicked. And stage 3 is going to be to actually get some data from the user. So to do that, we need a text field. So let's add one of those in. Here we go. I'm going to pop it up there. And essentially, I'm going to ask the user their name. So in there, I'm going to say, what is your name? And all we want is for the user's name to appear in the label. So instead of having the label text being "you click the button," we want it to be the user's name. Now, if you're feeling bold, you're welcome to attempt that as a challenge. Feel free to pause the video now and give it a try, but it is a little bit tricky. So I'll give you a moment, but I will definitely forgive you if you decide to follow this one along. So stage 1, just as with the label, we're going to create an outlet for our text field. So I just control dragged there. I'm going to call it text field. Notice I've used something called camel case there. This is a very common programming technique and something we'll be using throughout this course, that when you're defining variable names, you start off with lowercase letters and then the second word you capitalize, and then any other words we capitalize the first letter in that word, and that just makes it reasonably easy to read from a human perspective. So let's add that in. I like to separate my code out. You can have as many line breaks as you like with code. Really, it's just a matter of making it look attractive and easy to read and manage. So now we've created a variable called text field, which is this text field here. Okay, so all we need to do to make the label text equal to the value of the text field is change that string, which was what we previously made the label text, and we want to make this the content of the text field. So to get that, we just use text field, and yep, you guessed it, text. So we just set label.text is equal to textfield.text. Simple as that. Let's give it a try. Now I'm hoping slightly that if you didn't try that for yourself, you're slightly kicking yourself and you're thinking, maybe I could have done that after all. Let's give it a try. So I'll put Rob in there and then tap the button, and there we go. Rob. I'm going to do one more thing there just to make it a little bit more friendly. I want the app to say "Hello, Rob," rather than just displaying the name Rob. And to do that, I'm going to set the label text to the word hello. And then I'm going to use a plus to combine that with my text. And you can see I get a warning there, which if I spread this out all the way, value of optional type string not unwrapped. Did you mean to use exclamation mark or question mark? And that's because textfield.text might not have a value. There's a chance that it doesn't have a value, and if it doesn't, then the app would crash at this point. So that's why we're getting that error, and there's quite a neat way around that. And that's to check that it has a value first. So what I'm going to do is use a command called if, which checks whether something is true. And I'm going to attempt to create a variable called name. So this let command creates a variable called name. And I'm going to set that equal to textfield.text. And if that was successful, then textfield.text must have a value. So this avoids the risk that textfield.text doesn't have a value. And generally, when we have if statements, we put parentheses after them, just like we did over here with this method and viewDidLoad. So if this happens, then I can use hello plus and then my variable name. So we're slightly getting ahead of ourselves here. I'm using a lot of commands that we haven't looked at in great detail, and that's really because I want to give you a sense of how Swift works and how you can build an app very quickly without getting into the messy details of Swift, as we'll do in the next chapter. So once again, there might be a few small things that aren't 100% clear right now, but hopefully you've got the idea that what this is doing is checking to see if I can create a variable called name, which is equal to textfield.text, i.e. the value of this text field. If I can do that, then we'll display hello and then the name. Now there is one very small issue. This code will run fine, but maybe you can spot the issue that we're going to have when I run this code. I'm going to run it and we'll see if you are right. So let's try it again. I'll put Rob in there and click me. And you can see it's worked, but we haven't got a space. That's quite a common early programmer mistake to make. So we need to have a space at the end of there for our name to follow. So let's just try that one more time. There we go. Hello, Rob. Fabulous. All right, now we've done quite a lot there, so I think it's definitely time for you to have a go at this yourself. So I would like you to create a new project from scratch. And then I want you to add a text field which asks, how old are you? Then we'll have a button, and again, we want that button to say click me, and then when they click the button, say you are, and then however many years old they are, years old. Simple as that. Very, very simple, and using exactly the same techniques that you learned here. Try not to actually look at this code and copy it. If you can do it from memory, then great. But if you need to get a bit of inspiration and look back at this code, then feel free. All right, time to pause the video and give it a shot. Best of luck. All right, hope that went well. I'm going to create a new project, just like we did at the beginning of this section. So File, New Project. It's going to be a single view app. You can call it whatever we like really, but I'm going to go for Age App. There we go. I'll save it on the desktop. And it obviously looks very similar to what we had before. I'm going to jump straight over to the main storyboard to start adding our user interface elements. So down here on the object library, Let's start with our text field. So I'll drag it over there and have it full width, or almost full width. And we want the placeholder to be, what was it? How old are you? There we go. Next, we need a button. So this will be centered. Click me, stretch it out a little bit and recenter it. And then finally we'll need our label, which I'll put underneath there. And I'll just get rid of the text. All right, now we need to set up our code. So let's bring in the assistant editor on the right there with viewcontroller.swift. And I'll start by creating the outlets. So I'm going to control drag. This is our text field. And I want to create an outlet for it. So connect. Next, I'll create an outlet for the label. So again, control dragging. I'll just call it label. And finally, I want to create an action for the button. So control drag on the button. Don't forget to select action. It's an easy mistake to make. And again, I'll call that button clicked. Of course, we're rather tapping the button rather than clicking it, but you get what I mean. All right, so now we want to do step 4. We've done steps 1, 2, and 3. We want to say you are, and then however many years old they've put in that box there. So we'd want to update the label text. So label dot text. And again, we want to set that to something involving the value that they're going to put in that box. But we want to check that that value exists first, otherwise we'll get an error. So we'll check to see if we can create a variable called age, which is equal to the value of the text field, which is text field dot text. If we can do that, it must have a value. So I'm just going to surround that with curly brackets there. And you don't have to do the indenting, but it definitely makes your code look a lot nicer, much easier to read. And if that's the case, initially as a test, I'll just set it to age and let's see what happens. Oop, I'm going to just select the iPhone 7 there. It always selects the 7 Plus by default, but that's a problem for me because it doesn't display on my screen nicely. It's too big. So I'll switch back to 7. And then I'll just put in 36 and there we go. So that has worked fine, although it's not centered, is it? I forgot to center the label. So let's quickly do that. There we go. Oh, and actually while we're here, let's stretch the label all the way so that it's got enough room to display the text that we want. And just to remind myself, what we want is you are, and then however many years they enter, years old. Okay, so we start with you are. Don't forget the space. And then the plus symbol to connect that with their age. And then this is the slight difference from what we did before. We want to put some text at the end of that. So we use another plus. Don't forget the other space. And then we add the years old. All right, let's give it a try. So again, I'll enter 36. There we go. You are 36 years old. And a small thing, you get bonus points if you remembered to change the keyboard type to a number pad. That makes life much easier for your users, so they don't need to find the number area on the keyboard. So now if we run it, see, we've got this much nicer number pad. Still works just as well. All right, so we've learned a huge amount in this video. We're now able to connect up buttons, labels, and text fields and make our app interactive so that when the user clicks on a button, our code takes the value from the text field and displays that along with some other text on the label. So we've come a long way. We're almost ready to build the big cat ears app, which we're building at the end of this section. There's just one more thing that I want to teach you before we do that, and that is how to add images to your apps. And we'll do that in the next video.